What is one thing that Garth Brooks and Venezuela have in common? If you guessed friends in low places, congratulations. The difference between Garth Brooks and Venezuela is that he is not friends with Iran, at least not that I know of, and nobody is supplying him with a bunch of weapons, industrial support, and terror groups. Venezuela and Iran's relationship goes back to the late 1940s, but it got serious under the Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro regimes. Iran has provided the Latin American nation with CM-90 anti-ship missiles, fast attack boats, Shahed drones, sanction-skirting economic support, and even a Hezbollah presence. Welcome back to Task and Purpose. I'm Kyle, and today we're going to walk through Iran and Venezuela's close relationship, what each nation gets out of it, and what all of this means for the United States and the region at large. But before we get to that, a quick word from today's sponsor, Odoo. If you're in manufacturing, you already know the challenges. Orders stack up, delays start sneaking in, all your tools that are supposed to make your life easier start to do the opposite. Odoo fixes that. Odoo gives you one dashboard where you can manage assembly stations, check load times, track work orders, keep up with shipments. Everything that happens on your floor, you can see. Their barcode app makes it easy to scan and log components in real time right from the production line. So you spend less time fixing data errors and more time getting orders out the door. Need to check a worksheet or bill of materials? It's all right there, right in the dashboard, connected and synced. With Odoo, you have everything covered from planning to production with smooth and simple software. Start with your first app for free at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com. You'll be happy you did, and we'd like to thank Odoo for sponsoring today's episode. Iran and Venezuela didn't just wake up one day and decide to have a giant missile party in the Caribbean, although Missile Party is a pretty great band name. This relationship, at least the one that we see today, has been built up over the last 2 decades. Under Hugo Chavez and then Nicolas Maduro, Caracas leaned hard into relationships with countries that could help it dodge US sanctions and offer political backing. Places like Russia, China, Cuba, and Iran. In June of 2022, Iran and Venezuela signed a 20-year cooperation agreement in Tehran that covered everything from oil and refining to defense and intelligence cooperation. The basic deal is relatively simple. Iran gets a sanctions-dodging logistics hub in the Western Hemisphere, new markets for its oil and arms industry, and a friendly government that's willing to host Iranian ships, aircraft, and advisors in the Western Hemisphere. In return, Venezuela gets fuel, refinery expertise, industrial help, and access to Iranian military technology at a time when its own Russian-supplied gear is aging and its economy is in freefall. To do this, Iran has employed dual-use commercial cover to move equipment into Venezuela. They send cargo flights and ships that are supposedly full of auto parts or machinery that just so happen can also be used as missile components, drone kits, or other military hardware. By 2023, that cooperation was clearly visible. At a Venezuelan naval parade that summer, analysts noted Iranian-made fast attack boats with anti-ship missile launchers on their deck, alongside reports of Iranian UAV shipments and precision-guided munitions being delivered under commercial cover. So let's get into the actual hardware. Let's start first with what they have on the water. Venezuela has acquired a batch of 6 to 8 small Iranian fast attack craft, often described as Zulfiqar class or Paykop type patrol boats. Outfitting these, analysts have noted Iranian-made CM-90 anti-ship missiles. These aren't big boats. A typical Iranian fast attack craft is around 17 meters long or about 55 feet. They're also very lightly built because they're designed to sprint at more than 40 to 50 knots near the coast, not really made for cross-ocean travel. In the Persian Gulf, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps uses them as part of swarm tactics. They send out lots of small, fast boats that rush a larger target from different angles while firing anti-ship missiles, rockets, and machine guns. In Venezuelan service, the concept is similar, but the ocean is a lot bigger. The CM-90 itself is the export version of Iran's Nasir anti-ship missile, which is a version of China's C-704 missile. It's about 13 feet long and weighs about 770 pounds with a warhead that weighs about 280 pounds and it has a range of about 55 miles. It uses active radar for guidance, and it flies low in a sea-skimming profile, just like most modern subsonic anti-ship missiles. Now, the range is not game-changing by any means, but it does create a real anti-ship bubble inside about 50 nautical miles of the Venezuelan coast. This is kind of a big deal around key naval bases like Puerto Cabello. And when they're mounted on those fast attack boats, that range is extended out with those boats. Of course, US ships don't need to get within 50 miles of the Venezuelan coast to be effective, because they have things like Tomahawk missiles that can hit a target over 1,000 miles away, F-18s from USS Gerald R. Ford with several hundred miles of range, and a host of other weapons that can take out the launchers before they even have a chance to fire at a ship. But if it comes down to an amphibious operation where we're sending LCACs and ACVs ashore, then they can be a pretty big problem. In 2024, Venezuela's defense ministry posted images and video of Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez touring the CM-90 workshop at Puerto Cabello and standing next to the missile canisters. Later that summer, Venezuelan media showed a live fire launch of a CM-90 from a patrol vessel during an exercise. So this is not theoretical, the missiles are actually there and the launchers are installed, and the crews have at least gone through the basics of firing them. Alone, they really don't offer much, but as with most weapons, they're just one piece of a layered system. Where things get a little more complicated for the United States and Venezuela's other regional rivals is in the air, so let's get to that. Iran has become one of the world's most aggressive exporters of drones. Mohajer drones and Shahed one-way attack drones have shown up in places like Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Ukraine, so we all can figure that Latin America was not going to stay off that list forever. First, the Mohajer drones. These are small to medium-sized multi-role UAVs. Back in 2013, Venezuela put the domestically produced Arpia drone into service. This is their version of the Iranian Mohajer-2 that was derived from the Mohajer-1, which first entered service during the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, so they go way back. These are rather limited by modern standards, but they can still stay aloft for about 3 hours and are now capable of carrying munitions. Venezuela has an updated version they call the Antonio Jose de Sucre, or ANSU-100, that was unveiled in 2022. Thanks to a technology transfer with Iran, Venezuela produces both of these drones domestically. Iran has also supplied Venezuela with their Mohajer-6 drones. According to open source technical data, it can stay in the air for around 12 hours, cruise at about 125 miles an hour, and operate out to several hundred kilometers from its ground control station. These can carry up to 4 precision-guided munitions, typically the KAME series of bombs. This is Iran's most capable ISR/strike drone option besides the Mohajer-10 and presents a relatively significant threat, but it doesn't appear as if Venezuela is producing these on their own yet, or that they have a lot of them. Like the United States now, they are producing a copy of the Shahed one-way attack drone. They call their version the Zamora V1, and according to an infographic displayed with the drone in 2024, it has a range of just 18 miles, a ceiling of 6,500 feet, and a top speed of 93 miles an hour. Keeping things simple though, it uses an RPG-7 round as the warhead. They've also been producing copies of the Iranian Shahed-171 that they call the ANSU-200. This flying wing style drone is based on the American RQ-170 drone, which Iran captured in 2011 after bringing one down. Like Hollywood, just nothing is original anymore, it's just copies of copies all the way down. Anyway, there aren't really specs on this one because both Iran and Venezuela are pretty tight-lipped about it. The jet-powered Dorito drone was unveiled in a parade in 2022, and it isn't clear if they can be armed or produced in any meaningful numbers. Even in the parade, they only showed a few. Taken together though, these drones suggest 3 things. 1. Iran has provided at least some Mohajer series systems directly. 2. There's been a technology transfer so Venezuela can assemble or modify drones locally. And 3. Caracas is trying to copy the Shahed-style one-way attack drone concept that has been used by Russia and the Houthis to hit ships and infrastructure. Are we talking about a massive drone fleet like we've seen in Ukraine or Gaza? No. The available evidence points to a modest but growing capability, not thousands of drones stacked in a warehouse. But for a country whose conventional forces have been hollowed out by years of corruption and underinvestment, even a small number of modern drones is a big leap. But Are they a real threat? Let's talk about what all this hardware actually means for US forces, Venezuela's neighbors, and commercial shipping in the region. The CM-90 plus small fast attack craft give Venezuela a credible, if limited, anti-ship punch inside its coastal waters and near key sea lanes. A 55-mile range missile launched from a fast boat or a coastal launcher can threaten US destroyers, Coast Guard cutters, or logistics ships operating close to the Venezuelan coast, especially in the confined waters near important ports and islands where smaller vessels can more easily hide. That threat is magnified if you layer in drones. A Mohajer-6 orbiting offshore can help find and track targets, feeding coordinates and imagery back to coastal batteries or missile boats. A cheap loitering munition like the Zamora V1 can be used to harass ships at anchor, strike radar sites, or create confusion during a crisis. In the worst case scenario, which we are going to say is an actual shooting war, Venezuela could launch, or at least try to launch, CM-90s at the US ships and attempt to swarm them with Iranian-style fast attack craft while flying drones overhead for targeting. US ships are built and sailors are trained to fight in high-end missile environments, and the odds are very high that the Navy would quickly destroy whatever is launching them and any associated infrastructure. But that doesn't mean a missile couldn't get lucky, or that a miscalculation couldn't cause a lot of damage or casualties. As we discussed in our breakdown of Venezuela's military, the country also has several other non-Iranian weapon systems, like Russian Su-30 jets that carry Russian Kh-31 anti-ship missiles, relatively advanced anti-air weapons, and several larger vessels, among other things. Adding all these weapons together still doesn't create a particularly formidable foe for a carrier strike group and the 22nd MEU, but they do present a great enough threat that could certainly kill American service members. It's also important to be honest about the other side of the equation, Venezuela's actual capacity to use this stuff. Most serious assessments of Venezuela's armed forces describe a military that is large on paper but hollow in reality. Years of corruption, politicization, and economic collapse have hammered training, maintenance, and morale. There are questions around whether those Russian-supplied aircraft and anti-air systems even work, or if Venezuelan crews are trained to properly operate them. There's no reason to think that these new Iranian systems are magically exempt from these problems. Keeping a small fleet of fast attack craft and a stockpile of CM-90s ready to go is one thing. Building and sustaining a complex kill chain that links coastal radar, drones, missile boats, and command and control in a contested electromagnetic environment is something else entirely. But that's where Iran comes in. In the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea, Tehran has built a model of anti-access warfare that relies on exactly this mix of small boats, anti-ship missiles, mines, and drones, all backed by IRGC advisors and a lot of experimentation. When analysts talk about Venezuela as Iran's distant flank, this is what they're worried about. It's not just about the hardware, but about the doctrine and training being exported to a country sitting on America's maritime doorstep. The evidence we have today suggests that Iran is indeed providing training and technical support, but at a relatively modest scale. It is still enough to move the needle for a struggling military like Venezuela's, though. So you end up with a weird mix. On one hand, you have a regime with serious readiness problems and a track record of using the military as a political prop. On the other hand, you have a handful of genuinely modern weapons and an outside patron that is very good at using cheap drones and missiles to punch above its weight. That combination is not going to defeat the US Navy in open battle, but it's more than enough to cause damage, and that's what we should be worried about. Big picture is that Iran has managed to bolt pieces of its Persian Gulf playbook onto a fragile Latin American military. But Iran's playbook doesn't stop at hardware. They're also pushing their proxy militias and terror groups, so let's discuss that now. Drones and boats are only part of the story. The more worrying piece is Iran's most notable export: proxy militias and terrorist groups. The United States has known of terror groups operating in Latin America for decades, but in 2005, when Mahmoud Ahmadinejad became Iran's president and cozied up to Hugo Chavez, they really started paying close attention. A 2006 hearing in front of the House Subcommittee on International Terrorism and Non-Proliferation titled "Venezuela, Terrorism Hub of South America?" mentions Iran 33 times. The focus, even then, wasn't just on Colombian terror groups such as FARC and ELN, but on Hezbollah, Hamas, and Al-Qaeda. Of those three groups, Hezbollah is mentioned 13 times compared to 3 and 4 times for Hamas and Al-Qaeda respectively. Despite being a Lebanese terror group, Hezbollah-linked groups operate around the world, including in Venezuela and what is known as the tri-border region of Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay. The concern at that 2006 hearing, and in ones that followed in the years after, was Hezbollah's access to Venezuelan politics and the apparent fundraising efforts through narcotics trafficking, smuggling operations, and even legitimate businesses. They specifically mentioned the free trade resort location of Margarita Island multiple times. This method of essentially exporting terror creates a very sticky presence for Iran. Even if the Maduro regime is toppled, Hezbollah will still be operating in the shadows, giving Iran eyes and ears in the Western Hemisphere to act as a destabilizing agent. This more persistent presence isn't something that we can easily eradicate with missiles, as we've seen in our seemingly never-ending global war on terror. Garth Brooks might have friends in low places, but Venezuela's friends come with missiles, drones, and militias attached. How much that actually matters depends less on the hardware and more on what Tehran and Caracas decide to do with it. Are any of these reasons, by themselves, enough for a war? I don't know. I generally think that war is not a good thing and we should avoid it whenever possible. And Washington has run a similar playbook for years, arming partners and working with militias from Iraq and Afghanistan to Syria. But not many in Washington are comfortable with a hostile government supported by Iran, Russia, and China right here in our hemisphere, so I wouldn't imagine this problem will go away anytime soon. As always, let us know what you think in the comments. I actually learned a lot doing the research for this script, and it was fun to do. I genuinely didn't know that Hezbollah was so heavily ingrained in Venezuela, so let us know what you learned or what you didn't want to learn and how you feel about this. We appreciate that. Now it's channel update time. I wrote this script, and Savvy, which is not one person, it's actually multiple people that do this, edited the video, so give the whole team the shout out. They do a great job, and they really make my job easier. Anyways, in the past couple videos, I've left my email, kyle.gunn@taskandpurpose.com. My initial motive for this was to get people, service members, veterans, to reach out during the holidays if they needed anything. It gets kind of, shitty in the barracks, or you go home and it's not great. All your high school friends suck because they're lazy, they don't talk like you. You just miss hanging out with the boys in the barracks. I get it. So that offer still stands, and it will stand past the holidays. I'm always here for service members, veterans, whatever they need. We have a really awesome platform, and I actually enjoy being able to do this. So hit me up if you need anything. And civilians, you guys got problems too, right? I'm a civilian now. I'm a Marine veteran, but I still operate in the civilian world. So if you've got stuff you just want to talk through, or you've got feedback, criticism, you hate my semi-irritating voice, as somebody said, they sent a really nice email, but they said I have a semi-irritating voice. Not gonna fight you on that. Can't fight you on that because it's true. But whatever you need, it's my job to listen to it. It's my job to react to it, as long as it's not unhinged. And I just appreciate getting to know the audience one by one. And we have a big audience, and I really wish I could get to know you guys. Anyway, there's a good chance I'm going to go to SHOT Show in January, so if there's something that you want to see from there, let me know via email or in the comments. We're starting to get a lot more comments, and I just can't go through them all, so if you have something specific, email is probably best. Other than that, I don't have a whole lot else. I just really appreciate you all being here with me today. The whole team that's growing now, we all appreciate your support. So I'm going to stop talking. I am Kyle, your friendly ginger producer man. You are all dismissed, and I will see you next time.